Hello teachers, this video is being created to help you understand how CCAP has been organized to support your conceptual planning of this unit. Once you click on the Western Hemisphere Exploring Geographic Issues unit, you're going to be taken to this unit tab, and the top of the unit tab will have a brief description of the unit. So this can help you to see what is the big idea of the unit. Down here in unit considerations is anything that has been added to this unit to help you as a teacher. None of this is intended for students. So as we shift to the next tab over, stage 1, we start to see up here are the state standards that can help you to understand where this learning comes from, and the overarching understandings and the overarching essential questions, the goals that we have for students when they finish 12th grade. And as you look at those, it's not that you are necessarily accountable for the complexity of that type of learning. It's just to help you see what might be your piece of the puzzle in this larger picture. So as you read through the unit of study, you start to see, okay, I see how this is connected to where students are going throughout their school career. In terms of big ideas, I like to think of this as really large conceptual language or big idea language that we use within this unit. So citizenship, in this unit, we're actually looking at the concept of global citizenship. What does it mean to be a citizen in a global society? Government. What is the impact of government on geographic issues? Not only governments within the location where the geographic issues are taking place, but what is the impact of governments throughout the world in influencing how different places might adapt due to geographic issues? Here we have the interaction between human and physical systems, or human and physical interaction. How are people interacting with their landscape? And perception. Sometimes when we think of geographic issues, people have a different perception of the issue. So people who are directly involved with the issue probably have different perceptions than those who might be reading about it or finding out about it from throughout the world. And last, systems. We've talked about human and physical systems, but a lot of times we have human systems interacting with other human systems. So as I go down here to the organizing concepts that are used to share the goals for this unit, I'm going to start down here with this one on spatial inquiry. Spatial inquiry is really this concept that we use a variety of tools and a variety of sources in order to learn about the space on Earth, or to learn about places on Earth. And those tools might be maps, globes, charts, graphs, diagrams, texts, videos, a variety of things. And we want to expose students to all those different types of sources, because those are the sources they're going to encounter in their life. So you're going to see that this is all about what are the sources that students use and what do they do with those sources. They collect, analyze, interpret, and use the data, and they examine the sources. Okay? So I'm going to shift up here to the other organizing concept, which was movement and interdependence. And when I think of movement and interdependence, sometimes it's easy to think of it as people moving and the interdependence of people. But sometimes people are independent because of their ideas, and the ideas of people move. So in our society today, where we can interact with people throughout the world at the spur of the moment, through typing, through participating in blogs or different chats or whatnot, our ideas begin to move. So as we look at the broader ideas for movement and interdependence, it's this idea that we are looking at geographic issues. And as we think of these geographic issues, number one, we recognize that people and places are interconnected. So things that are happening in Brazil don't just stay in Brazil. Many times those issues begin to impact the way different places throughout the world are connecting with Brazil, or the way that we see how Brazil might be dealing with an issue, and how does that influence how we deal with that issue in the future. Here, the idea that people influence how governments and nations address issues, that we as citizens are not powerless, that it is our role to influence governments and nations in how they address issues. And again, this issue of that the future is impacted by how we analyze and attempt to solve the geographic problems of today. So here we're going to see it sort of broken into what are some of the geographic issues, different perspectives of issues, and how students over here are going to think about different issues. So I'm going to shift up here to stage 2. Stage 2, we have some sample assessments, then these will be built over time. Here are some sample performance tests, and again, different ideas for different types of assessment. We've also added this social studies assessment rubric for short constructed response, because students are using that in 7th grade, and we felt like teachers would find that valuable for students in 6th grade so that they could begin to evaluate the quality of their short constructed response items. Shifting to stage 3, I'm going to go to the right here, and this unit starts with a unit outline of possible approach, and it's actually it's a very brief unit outline. That unit outline reflects these resource bundles down below, but you might begin with this idea of what are the processes we're going to use and what are the questions we're going to ask. I want you to know that these have been broken out over here because they're also instructional practices. So you're going to see those resources available here, such as what are the ways we look at issues through a political, economic, or social cultural lens? What are the questions and processes that we use as we begin to gather ideas and information about a geographic issue before we determine what are potential solutions to that issue? And then, what might this look like within the classroom? What is the teacher doing in terms of his or her modeling? And what are the students doing in terms of their work, their thinking, and their interaction and collaboration? So over here, as we get into the next resource bundle, it's about interdependence and interconnectedness in a global society. So that's where students are looking at what does it mean to be a global citizen, and what structures are in place so that the global society is able to interact with each other and also support each other as they deal with geographic issues. So as we get down here, I'm going to see 4 resource bundles at this time. One on physical systems impacting human systems, one on population growth and migration, one on pollution, and one on accessing and using natural energy resources. So consider these as starting places. So when I think of a geographic issue, some geographic issues might be connected to globalization, population growth, food supply, standard of living, migration, health, human rights, energy resources. And while we might look at those separately, we start to realize that everything is very interconnected. But as a teacher, it might be valuable to say, okay, what is going to be my starting place for looking at this issue? So I've already opened this one, but this one on population growth and migration, I'm going to show you what that resource bundle looks like. When I look at that resource bundle for population growth and migration, here at the top there are some resources for students to just learn about population growth. What is it? Before they ever look at it within the Western Hemisphere. And migration. What is migration? Why do people move? What are some patterns of migration? And then students can start to dig in. Okay, let's look at what migration and population growth, what its impact might be within the Western Hemisphere. Sometimes you're going to have case studies, such as this one on the immigration to the United States over time, that has a variety of sources in order to study that issue. Sometimes you're just going to have a single source to study an issue, such as this one on squatters on the skyline from Venezuela. So, just as we as people would study an issue, sometimes we as people, we study an issue through looking at one source. Sometimes we study it through looking at several sources. When we look at several sources, we begin to understand the complexity of an issue. But this is just to help you understand how that has been organized. So each of these might be considered a starting place for a geographic issue, such as what is the starting place, for pollution? How does pollution affect people economically, politically, or socially and culturally? And again, we see these for other issues. I also want to point out this link here for news, current events, and topics. So I've already opened this link here as well, and this document has a link to each of the individual countries within and territories within the Western Hemisphere. These links go to different pages within the New York Times because of the way the New York Times is able to organize and filter information. So that's a really great place if you want to look at and see what are some different issues going on in particular countries. Some of those countries are going to have more news than others. I think it's just the way of news, like a Brazil, Canada, Cuba, Argentina. Some of those places are going to have more information than, let's say, like Guyana or Honduras or Suriname. So those are great links. And down here you're also going to see links that take you to different news sources for geographic issues. I'd also like to point at this top one, which is current events appropriate for 6th graders, because there are lots of current events that when we listen to them on the news, we think, gosh, that might not be appropriate for my students. So these have been sort of curated in case you'd like to look at those for some examples of current events that are taking place throughout the Western Hemisphere. So I hope this has been helpful for you, and you are successful in planning and engaging students in what's going on today in the world in the Western Hemisphere.